The invoice taped to my front door was my first clue that something wasn't right with the house I just bought in Riverside, California. But I didn't realize I'd be dealing with a scam until I actually read the thing. I'm Logan Walsh, and I just closed on my dream property 2 weeks earlier. The house sat on a quiet street called Magnolia Drive, a beautiful 3-bedroom ranch with a decent yard and a view of the San Bernardino Mountains in the distance. The best part was the price. I'd gotten it for about $20,000 under market value, which seemed like an incredible deal at the time. Now, staring at this invoice demanding $1,200 in HOA fees, I was starting to understand why. The invoice was printed on official-looking letterhead that read Magnolia Grove Homeowners Association in gold script at the top. Below that, in smaller print, it listed a post office box in Riverside and a phone number with a local area code. The charges were broken down into monthly dues, a new member initiation fee, and something called a landscaping assessment fee. At the bottom, in bold red letters, it warned that failure to pay within 30 days would result in a lien being placed on my property. I pulled the invoice off the door and went inside, immediately heading to my home office where I'd stored all my closing documents. I spent the next hour going through every piece of paper my real estate agent had given me, every disclosure form, every inspection report, and every legal document related to the sale. Nowhere, and I mean absolutely nowhere, was there any mention of a homeowners association. The seller's disclosure form specifically asked if the property was part of an HOA, and the box marked no was clearly checked. I'd asked my agent about it before making the offer because I specifically wanted to avoid HOA drama. She'd assured me the property was not part of any association. That had been one of the selling points. I called my real estate agent, Patricia Chen, who'd helped me find and purchase the house. She picked up on the third ring. "Logan, hey, how's the new place treating you?" "Patricia, I just found an invoice on my door from something called the Magnolia Grove Homeowners Association. They're demanding $1,200. There was a pause on the other end. "That's impossible. I checked specifically. Your property isn't part of any HOA. I have the documentation right here in my files." That's what I thought, but this invoice looks pretty official. It's got a phone number and everything. "Don't pay anything," Patricia said firmly. "Something's not right. I'm going to make some calls and get back to you. Can you scan that invoice and email it to me?" I agreed and sent her the document. Then I decided to do some investigating of my own. I dialed the number on the invoice, expecting maybe a voicemail or an answering service. Instead, a woman picked up on the second ring. "Magnolia Grove HOA, this is Brenda speaking." Her voice was sharp and businesslike, with an edge that immediately put me on guard. "Hi, I'm Logan Walsh. I just received an invoice from your office, but I think there's been a mistake. I'm not part of any homeowners association. Property address." She demanded. I gave her my address on Magnolia Drive. "Then you're part of the association," she said matter-of-factly. "All properties on Magnolia Drive are included in our covenant." That's not what my closing documents say. In fact, my seller's disclosure specifically states there's no HOA. Well, your seller was mistaken. The association was established 6 months ago and your property falls within the boundaries. You need to pay your dues, Mr. Walsh, or we'll be forced to take action. The way she said, "take action," sounded almost threatening. I felt my jaw tighten. "I'd like to see the legal documents establishing this HOA and proving my property is included." "Those documents are available at our office," Brenda said coolly. "Office hours are by appointment only. The initiation fee increases by $50 every week you delay, so I'd suggest you make that appointment soon. Where's your office? She rattled off an address on Tyler Street in downtown Riverside. I wrote it down, though I was already planning to look up property records at the county recorder's office first. I'll be in touch, I said and hung up before she could add any more threats. The next morning, I drove to the Riverside County Recorder's office on Orange Street. The building was a typical government structure, all concrete and glass, with a perpetually full parking lot. Inside, I waited in line behind 3 other people until I reached a clerk who looked like she'd been working there since the building opened. I need to look up HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions for my property, I told her, sliding a piece of paper with my address across the counter. She typed something into her computer, waited, then typed some more. Her eyebrows knitted together. Nothing's showing up for an active HOA on that property, she said. Let me check historical records. More typing. More waiting. There was an HOA established in 1987 for that development, but it was dissolved in 2003 due to inactivity. I'm not seeing anything after that. What about in the last year? Specifically, 6 months ago? She shook her head. Nothing. For an HOA to have legal authority, it needs to be properly filed with the county. They'd need to submit CC and RTCS, that's covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and those would show up in our system. I'm not seeing any filing for your street or any surrounding properties. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with anger. So if someone claimed to establish an HOA 6 months ago but didn't file it with the county, that HOA wouldn't have any legal authority, correct? They'd essentially be a fake organization. Unfortunately, we do see scams like this from time to time. People create official-looking documents and try to collect money from homeowners. If you've been contacted by a fraudulent HOA, you might want to report it to local law enforcement. I thanked her and asked for a printed record of the search results, which she provided for a small fee. Then I sat in my truck in the parking lot and called Patricia. I just left the county recorder's office, I told her. There's no HOA filed for my property. The clerk said the last one was dissolved in 2003. I knew it, Patricia said triumphantly. I'm actually glad you checked because I've been making calls this morning. I spoke to 3 other agents in the area, and 2 of them said they'd heard rumors about someone trying to set up a fake HOA in that neighborhood. Apparently, several homeowners have complained about receiving similar invoices. So what do I do? Just ignore them. Document everything, but don't pay a cent. You might also want to consult with a real estate attorney just to cover your bases. I can give you a referral if you need one. I took down the attorney's information, but decided to take one more step first. I wanted to visit the office address Brenda had given me and see what this operation actually looked like. The address on Tyler Street turned out to be a small office in a strip mall, sandwiched between a nail salon and a tax preparation business. The windows were covered with blinds, and a simple sign on the door read, Magnolia Grove Management Services. I tried the door, but it was locked. A handwritten note taped to the glass said, by appointment only, with a phone number that matched the one on my invoice. I called the number right there, standing in front of the door. Magnolia Grove HOA, this is Brenda speaking. Hi, this is Logan Walsh. I'm standing outside your office on Tyler Street right now. Can you let me in? I'd like to see those documents you mentioned. There was a long pause. I'm not in the office today. You need to make an appointment. Fine. What's your next available appointment? Let me check the schedule. I heard papers rustling in the background, which seemed odd since it was 2025 and most businesses use digital calendars. I can see you next Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon. That's 5 days from now. Can't you do anything sooner? That's the earliest availability. Take it or leave it. I reluctantly agreed and hung up. Then I walked over to the nail salon next door and went inside. A young woman at the front desk looked up from her phone and smiled. "You know anything about the office next door?" I asked, gesturing toward the Magnolia Grove Management Services sign. "The one with the covered windows," she wrinkled her nose. "That place. Some lady rents it, but I hardly ever see anyone there. Maybe once or twice a week someone shows up for like an hour. It's weird." "How long have they been there?" "Maybe 6 or 7 months. I'm not totally sure. My aunt owns this salon, and she said the lady who rented it seemed sketchy, but her money was good, so whatever." I thanked her and left, my mind racing. This was looking more and more like a scam operation, but I needed concrete proof. I decided to attend that Tuesday appointment and see what Brenda had to say for herself. In the meantime, I'd contact the attorney Patricia had recommended. David Martinez's law office was in a professional building off Highway 91. When I called, his secretary squeezed me in for a consultation that same afternoon. Martinez was in his mid-40s, with graying hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen every type of legal problem imaginable. I laid out the situation, showing him the invoice, the county recorder's office documentation, and explaining what I'd discovered about the office on Tyler Street. "This is fraud," Martinez said simply. "What you're describing is a fairly sophisticated scam, but it's still fraud. They're impersonating a legitimate homeowners association to collect money from homeowners. So what's my next step? First, don't pay them anything. Second, keep documenting everything. I'd like you to go to that Tuesday appointment and record the conversation. California is a 2-party consent state for recordings, so inform them you're recording at the start of the meeting. If they refuse to let you record, that's a red flag. If they do let you record, great. We'll have documentation of whatever false claims they make. And then we'll consider legal action. If this is affecting multiple homeowners in your area, there might be grounds for a class action lawsuit. But more immediately, this needs to be reported to the police. What they're doing is criminal." Martinez agreed to draft a formal cease and desist letter to send to the Magnolia Grove HOA. He'd have it ready by Monday, which would give me time to deliver it in person at my Tuesday appointment. Over the weekend, I did something I probably should have done from the start. I went door to door on my street and talked to my neighbors. Out of the 15 houses on Magnolia Drive, I managed to talk to owners at 11 of them. 8 had received the same invoice I had. 3 hadn't received anything, and they were the 3 homeowners who'd lived there the longest, all 20-plus years. One neighbor, a retired teacher named Frank Morrison, was particularly helpful. "I got that invoice about 2 months ago," Frank told me, standing on his front porch with his arms crossed. "Told them to pound sand. I've lived here for 30 years, and there hasn't been an HOA since the original one fell apart back in the early 2000s. Nobody wanted to pay dues for an association that didn't do anything, so it just died." "Did they threaten you with a lien?" "Oh sure, they sent me a couple more letters after I didn't pay. Very official looking, very threatening. But I called a lawyer friend of mine, and he told me not to worry about it. You can't put a lien on someone's property without legal authority, and they don't have any." "Did you report it to the police?" Frank shook his head. "Probably should have, but I figured if I ignored them, they'd go away." "Looks like they're still at it, though." Another neighbor, Jessica Patel, had actually paid the $1,200. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, wringing her hands anxiously. "They said they'd put a lien on my house, and I couldn't risk that. I'm trying to refinance next year." "Jessica, that lien threat is empty. They don't have the legal authority to put a lien on your property. I just came from the county recorder's office and there's no registered HOA for this street. Her face paled. So I paid $1,200 for nothing. Worse. You paid $1,200 to scammers. But we can fix this. I'm working with a lawyer and we're going to report this to the police. You should be able to get your money back. By the end of the weekend, I had commitments from 6 neighbors to join in a potential legal action against the fake HOA. I also had Jessica's bank records showing her payment had gone to an account registered to Magnolia Grove Community Association. The account was at a local credit union, which would make it easier to trace. Monday morning, Martinez called me with news. I did some digging on that business address, he said. The lease for that office space is registered to a Brenda Caldwell. I ran her name and she's got a history. She was involved in a similar scheme in Arizona about 8 years ago. Charges were filed, but they were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence. It looks like she's moved her operation to California. So we're dealing with a repeat offender. Exactly, which makes this case even stronger. I've finished your cease and desist letter. Stop by my office and pick it up, and definitely record that meeting tomorrow. I want to hear what she has to say when confronted with the facts. Tuesday afternoon arrived cloudy and cool, typical for January in Southern California. I drove to the Tyler Street office with a folder full of documents, including the county recorder's office report, Martinez's cease and desist letter, and statements from my neighbors. I also had my phone ready to record. At exactly 2 o'clock, I knocked on the door of Magnolia Grove Management Services. After a moment, I heard locks clicking and the door opened. The woman who answered was probably in her late 40s, with blonde hair that showed dark roots and was styled in a short, no-nonsense cut. She wore a dark blue business suit that looked expensive but slightly worn. Her smile was professional but didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Walsh, I presume? I'm Brenda Caldwell, president of the Magnolia Grove Homeowners Association. Nice to meet you, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Before we begin, I need to inform you that I'll be recording this conversation. Her smile faltered slightly. I'd prefer if you didn't. California law allows me to record as long as I inform you and I'm informing you. If you're not comfortable with that, we can end this meeting right now, and I'll just turn everything over to my attorney and the police. The word police made her eye twitch, but she stepped back and gestured for me to enter. Fine. Record if you must. I pulled out my phone, opened the recording app and hit record, stating the date, time, and location for the record. The office was sparse. There was a desk with a computer, 2 filing cabinets, and a couple of chairs. The walls were bare except for a framed print of a generic landscape. Everything about the space screamed temporary. So, Brenda said, settling into the chair behind the desk, you're here about your dues. I'm here because I believe your organization is fraudulent, I said, sitting across from her. I've done extensive research, and I can find no legal documentation establishing the Magnolia Grove Homeowners Association. The county recorder's office has no record of any CC and Articus being filed for my property or any property on Magnolia Drive in the last 20 years. Brenda's expression hardened. The association was properly established under California Civil Code Section 4100. We filed all necessary documents. Then you can show me those documents right now. I specifically requested to see them. She made a show of shuffling through papers on her desk. The original documents are with our attorney. I have copies, but they're not here at the moment. That's convenient. Let me save us both some time. I pulled out Martinez's cease and desist letter and slid it across the desk. This is from my attorney. It demands that you immediately cease and desist from claiming any authority over my property or attempting to collect any fees from me. It also puts you on notice that if you continue this fraudulent activity, we'll pursue legal action. Brenda barely glanced at the letter. You're making a big mistake, Mr. Walsh. When we place a lien on your property, and we will, it's going to cost you a lot more than $1,200 to remove it. You can't place a lien on my property because you have no legal standing. I've also discovered that you're running this same scam on at least 8 other homeowners on my street. One of them already paid you, and she'll be filing a police report for fraud. Now Brenda's professional facade cracked. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This meeting is over. Get out. Gladly, I said, standing and making sure my phone was still recording. But before I go, you should know that I'm reporting this to the Riverside Police Department this afternoon. I have documentation proving your HOA isn't legally registered. I have statements from multiple neighbors who have received fraudulent invoices, and I have bank records showing where the money is going. If I were you, I'd get a good attorney. Brenda's face had gone red. You have no idea what you're talking about. This is a legitimate association and you're going to regret this. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Get out of my office. I left, feeling my heart pounding but satisfied that I'd handled the confrontation well. The recording would be valuable evidence. Now it was time to involve law enforcement. The Riverside Police Department's main station was on Orange Street, not far from the county recorder's office. I walked in and asked to speak to someone about reporting fraud. After a short wait, I was directed to a desk where Detective Maria Santos was finishing up some paperwork. Santos was in her 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and sharp, intelligent eyes. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, spreading out all my documentation on her desk. So let me make sure I understand, she said after I finished. This woman is claiming to run an HOA, collecting dues from homeowners, but the HOA was never legally established and has no authority. Exactly. I have proof from the county recorder's office that there's no registered HOA for my property. I have statements from multiple neighbors who have received the same fraudulent invoices, and I have bank records showing that at least one neighbor already paid. Santos picked up the invoice I'd received. And you recorded your conversation with this Brenda Caldwell today? Yes, after informing her I was recording. It's all legal. Can I get a copy of that recording? I forwarded it to the email address she provided, along with copies of all my other documentation. Santos spent several minutes reviewing everything, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. This is definitely something we need to investigate, she said finally. The problem is, fraud cases can be tricky. We need to prove intent to defraud, which means showing that she knowingly made false claims. Based on what you've told me and what I'm seeing here, I think we have enough to at least bring her in for questioning. What happens next? I'll open an investigation. I'll need to get statements from your neighbors, especially the one who made a payment. I'll also need to contact the credit union where that account is held and see if we can freeze it. If there are other victims we don't know about yet, we'll need to find them too. I've already talked to most of my neighbors. 6 of them are willing to make statements. Santos looked impressed. You've done a lot of legwork on this. That'll help. Give me their contact information and I'll follow up. In the meantime, don't have any more contact with Brenda Caldwell or anyone associated with her fake HOA. If she contacts you, document it but don't engage. I left the police station feeling like I'd finally set the wheels of justice in motion. Now I just had to wait and see what happened. The waiting turned out to be longer than I expected. Days turned into weeks, and while Detective Santos kept me updated, the investigation moved slowly. She'd interviewed my neighbors and gotten their statements. She'd contacted the credit union and found that the account had a balance of just over $9,000, meaning Brenda had successfully scammed at least 7 or 8 other people besides Jessica Patel. The credit union froze the account pending the investigation. Santos also discovered that Brenda Caldwell had incorporated Magnolia Grove Community Association as a nonprofit corporation with the California Secretary of State, which gave her operation a veneer of legitimacy, but didn't actually give her any authority over our properties. The incorporation documents listed a P.O. box as the business address and Brenda as the registered agent. "She's smart," Santos told me during one of our phone updates. "She's done just enough legitimate-looking paperwork to confuse people, but she never filed the actual documents that would be required for a real HOA. It's fraudulent, but it's sophisticated fraud." 3 weeks after I first filed the police report, things escalated. I received a certified letter from a law firm in Los Angeles claiming to represent the Magnolia Grove Homeowners Association. The letter stated that I was in violation of my HOA obligations, that I owed not just the original $1,200 but now an additional $500 in late fees and collection costs, and that if I didn't pay within 10 days, they would place a lien on my property and potentially foreclose. I immediately forwarded the letter to both Detective Santos and David Martinez. Martinez called me within an hour. "This is incredibly stupid on their part," he said, and I could hear a mix of anger and disbelief in his voice. "They're doubling down on the fraud even though they know you've caught them. This law firm is either complicit in the scam or they're being lied to by their client. What should I do? Nothing. Don't respond. I'm going to contact this law firm and inform them that their client is under criminal investigation for fraud. If they're legitimate attorneys, they'll drop the case immediately. If they're part of the scam, well, that's just more evidence for the prosecution." Martinez was true to his word. He sent a strongly worded letter to the Los Angeles law firm, complete with copies of all our documentation, and a warning that continuing to pursue fraudulent claims would expose them to legal liability. 2 days later, the law firm sent a brief response stating they'd withdrawn from representing the Magnolia Grove Homeowners Association after reviewing the matter. That should have been the end of it, but Brenda Caldwell wasn't giving up. In mid-February, about 6 weeks after I'd first received the invoice, she showed up at my house. I was working from home that day when my doorbell rang around 10 in the morning. I opened the door to find Brenda standing on my porch, looking significantly less put together than when I'd met her at her office. Her hair was messy, her clothes were casual, and she had dark circles under her eyes. "Mr. Walsh, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "My attorney advised me not to speak with you. This conversation is over." I started to close the door, but she put her hand on it. "Please, just give me 5 minutes. I'm not here to threaten you or anything. I need to explain." Against my better judgment, curiosity got the better of me. "Fine. 5 minutes, and I'm recording this." I pulled out my phone and started recording, once again stating the date and time. Brenda didn't object. "Look," she said, her voice strained, "I know you think this is a scam, but it's not. I mean, not the way you think. When I moved to Riverside last year, I bought a house on Maple Street, right next to your development. The neighborhood was going downhill. People weren't maintaining their properties. There was trash everywhere. Property values were dropping. I thought if we could establish an HOA, we could fix things up, make the neighborhood nice again. So you decided to just declare yourself president of an HOA without actually going through the legal process." "I did go through the legal process," I incorporated the association, I opened a bank account, I created bylaws. I did everything the internet said to do, except file the CC and Articus with the county, which is literally the most important part. Without that, you have no legal authority over anyone's property. Brenda's face crumpled. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know that step was required. Someone told me that as long as the association was incorporated, that was enough. I've been using the money to hire landscapers to clean up the common areas to make improvements. What common areas? This is a residential street. There are no common areas. The entrance sign, the street corners, the landscaping along the main road. That's all public property maintained by the city. You're spending people's money on improvements to city-owned land. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I was trying to help. I just wanted to make the neighborhood better. I put in my own money too, thousands of dollars. This wasn't about stealing from people. I felt a brief flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly overridden by anger. Brenda, even if your intentions were good, what you did is illegal. You collected money from people under false pretenses. You threatened them with liens and legal action when you had no authority to do so. That's fraud, no matter how you spin it. I know, she whispered. I know, and I'm sorry. I just don't know how to fix it now. You fix it by cooperating with the police investigation. You return every penny you collected. You shut down this fake HOA immediately, and you accept whatever consequences come from this. She wiped her eyes. The police came to my house yesterday. They served me with a search warrant and took my computer and all my files. They said I'm probably going to be arrested. Then you need a lawyer, a criminal defense attorney, not whoever told you this HOA scheme was legal. I don't have money for a lawyer anymore. I spent everything on this stupid HOA idea. She left shortly after that, driving away in a Ford sedan that had seen better days. I immediately called Detective Santos and told her about the conversation. Yeah, we executed the search warrant yesterday, Santos confirmed. Her story about trying to improve the neighborhood is partially true, believe it or not. We found receipts showing she did hire landscapers and paid for some street cleaning. But she also paid herself a salary of $2,000 a month from the HOA account, which she didn't mention to you. She also used HOA funds for personal expenses, including her rent on that office, her car payment, and restaurant bills. So she's claiming good intentions but was also lining her pockets. Exactly. We're moving forward with charges. The district attorney is reviewing the case now. She'll probably be charged with multiple counts of fraud and grand theft. Based on the amount of money involved and the number of victims, she's looking at serious felony charges. The arrest happened on a rainy Thursday morning in late February. Detective Santos called to let me know that Brenda Caldwell had been taken into custody without incident. She was charged with 9 counts of grand theft by false pretenses, 1 count of attempted extortion, and multiple counts of fraud. Her bail was set at $50,000. The local news picked up the story, running a piece about the fake HOA scam that had targeted Riverside homeowners. A reporter even came to my house to interview me, though I declined to appear on camera. I did provide a statement about the importance of verifying HOA claims and checking county records before paying any dues. The publicity led to 3 more victims coming forward, people who lived on neighboring streets and had also been targeted by Brenda's scheme. The total amount she'd collected was over $15,000, which bumped up the severity of the charges. Martinez continued to represent me and several of my neighbors in civil proceedings to recover the money that had been paid. The court had frozen Brenda's assets, including the association bank account and her personal accounts. There was enough money to refund most of the victims, though the legal fees would eat up a significant portion. The criminal case moved through the system slowly. Brenda's public defender tried to negotiate a plea deal, arguing that her intentions had been good and that she'd used much of the money for legitimate neighborhood improvements. The prosecutor wasn't sympathetic. She committed fraud, plain and simple, Deputy District Attorney Robert Chen told me when I met with him to give my victim statement. The law doesn't care if she thought she was doing something good. She lied to people, threatened them, took their money under false pretenses, and used some of it for personal gain. That's criminal behavior. In April, 3 months after I'd first found that invoice on my door, Brenda Caldwell pleaded guilty to 5 counts of grand theft and 2 counts of fraud as part of a plea agreement. She was sentenced to 2 years in county jail, though the judge indicated she'd be eligible for work release after 6 months if she maintained good behavior. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to all victims and placed on probation for 5 years after her release. At the sentencing hearing, which I attended along with Jessica Patel and Frank Morrison, Brenda made a tearful statement. "I want to apologize to everyone I hurt," she said, her voice shaking. "I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing. I wanted to make our neighborhood better. But I went about it the wrong way and I broke the law. I'm sorry for the stress and financial hardship I caused. I'm sorry for lying and making threats. I take full responsibility for my actions." The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Thompson, was unmoved. "Miss Caldwell, I appreciate your apology, but I have to consider the seriousness of your crimes. You ran a sophisticated fraud scheme that victimized at least 12 people that we know of. You threatened them with legal action you had no authority to take. And when you were caught, you doubled down instead of admitting your wrongdoing. The only reason you're apologizing now is because you have no other choice. This court sentences you to 2 years in county jail and orders full restitution. I hope you use your time in custody to reflect on the real harm you've caused." After the sentencing, Jessica Patel turned to me in the courthouse hallway. "Thank you," she said simply. "If you hadn't investigated this and reported it to the police, she'd still be out there scamming people. I'd have never gotten my money back." "We all worked together on this," I said. "Frank, you too. Everyone who came forward made this possible," Frank grunted. "I'm just glad it's over. Though I have to say, you handled this whole thing pretty impressively, Logan. Most people would have just paid the invoice and moved on." "I'm too stubborn for that," I said with a smile. The civil case wrapped up in May. Martinez successfully recovered all the funds from Brenda's accounts, which totaled about $11,000 after legal fees. Each victim who'd paid money to the fake HOA received a full refund. The remaining few $1,000s was divided among all the homeowners who'd been targeted, including me, as compensation for our time and stress. I received a check for $300, which didn't come close to covering the time I'd invested in fighting this, but it was the principle that mattered. Martinez also helped us file a formal complaint with the California Secretary of State to dissolve the Magnolia Grove Community Association Corporation. The state agreed and struck it from the registry of active nonprofits. With the criminal case resolved and the money recovered, life slowly returned to normal. The news coverage died down, the reporters stopped calling, and Magnolia Drive became just another quiet residential street again. But the experience changed me in some fundamental ways. I became more skeptical of official-looking documents and more willing to question authority. I learned to trust but verify, to do my own research, and to stand up for myself when something didn't seem right. I also became something of a local expert on HOA fraud. Other homeowners who received suspicious invoices or letters from alleged homeowners associations started reaching out to me for advice. I helped several people verify whether their HOAs were legitimate by walking them through the process of checking county records. One case in particular stands out. In July, about 6 months after my ordeal with Brenda Caldwell, I received a call from a woman named Sophie Chen who lived in Morno Valley, about 20 miles from Riverside. She'd gotten my contact information from Detective Santos. I received an invoice from my HOA demanding $800, Sophie told me. But something about it feels wrong. The amount is way higher than what I usually pay, and they're threatening to put a lien on my house if I don't pay in 10 days. Is your property actually part of an HOA? I asked. Yes, definitely. I've been paying dues for 3 years since I bought the house. But this invoice seems different from the usual ones. Yes, the letterhead looks similar but not exactly the same, and they're asking me to pay into a different bank account than usual. The email address they provided is a Gmail account instead of the HOA's official domain. Red flags went up in my mind. Sophie, this sounds like someone is impersonating your legitimate HOA. Don't pay anything. Do you have contact information for your actual HOA board? Yes, I have the president's phone number. Call them right now and verify whether they sent this invoice. I'll bet they didn't. Sophie called me back 20 minutes later, her voice shaking. You were right. I talked to the HOA president and he said they didn't send any special assessment. Someone is definitely scamming us. He said 3 other homeowners in our development have called with the same question. I walked Sophie through the process of reporting the scam to local police and advised her to warn all her neighbors. It turned out that someone had hacked the HOA's mailing list and was sending fraudulent invoices to dozens of homeowners. The police caught the scammer within a week. It was a college kid who'd been doing IT work for the HOA and had stolen their member database. These follow-up cases reinforced what I'd learned from my own experience. HOA fraud comes in many forms, and the best defense is knowledge and vigilance. By August, nearly 7 months after that first invoice appeared on my door, I felt like I could finally put the whole saga behind me. The legal cases were closed, the money had been recovered, and Brenda Caldwell was serving her sentence. My life had returned to normal, and I was enjoying my house without the stress of dealing with a fake HOA. Then I got a call from Detective Santos. Logan, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Brenda Caldwell was released on work release last week. She's living in a halfway house and working at a grocery store to pay off her restitution. I don't think she'll cause you any problems, but I wanted you to know she's out. Thanks for letting me know, I said, feeling a slight unease. Do you really think she'll try something? No, I don't. She knows she's on very thin ice. Any violation of her probation and she goes straight back to jail to serve the rest of her sentence. Plus, she's got 5 years of supervised probation after the work release period. She'd be crazy to risk it. Santos was right. I never heard from Brenda Caldwell again. I did see her once, about a year later, working as a cashier at a Stater Bros grocery store in downtown Riverside. She saw me too, and our eyes met for a brief moment. She looked tired and defeated, much older than her late 40s. I gave her a slight nod, and she returned it before looking away. Neither of us said anything. There was nothing left to say. She'd committed a crime, got caught, and paid the price. I defended my rights, protected my neighbors, and ensured justice was served. The system had worked the way it was supposed to, which was all anyone could ask for. The long-term impact of the fake HOA scam went beyond just the immediate victims. The story became something of a cautionary tale in Riverside County real estate circles. Patricia Chen, my real estate agent, started including specific language in her buyer advisories about verifying HOA status through county records. Other agents followed suit. The county recorder's office, responding to the publicity from the case, created a new online portal where homeowners could easily search for HOA documentation related to their properties. They also published a consumer guide explaining how HOAs work, what legal requirements they must meet, and how to identify potential scams. Detective Santos told me that the Riverside Police Department had created a new protocol for investigating HOA-related fraud complaints. Before my case, these types of complaints had often been dismissed as civil matters rather than criminal ones. Now they took them seriously. Martinez, my attorney, started giving free seminars at the local library about HOA law and homeowner rights. He invited me to speak at one of these seminars, and I agreed. Standing in front of about 40 concerned homeowners, I told my story from start to finish, emphasizing the importance of doing your own research and not being intimidated by official-looking documents or threats. The key thing to remember, I told the audience, is that HOAs must follow the law just like everyone else. They can't just claim authority over your property. There's a legal process, and if that process wasn't followed, they have no power. Don't be afraid to ask questions, demand documentation, and verify everything through official channels like the county recorder's office. An elderly man in the back raised his hand. But what if you're not sure whether your HOA is legitimate or not? I've been paying dues for 10 years, but I've never actually seen the CC and Articus or any official documents. Then request them, I said. You have the right to see all the governing documents for your HOA. If they can't or won't provide them, that's a red flag. You can also check with the county yourself. It takes maybe an hour of your time, but it could save you thousands of dollars and endless headaches. After the seminar, several people came up to thank me and ask follow-up questions. One man told me he'd been in a dispute with his HOA for 2 years over architectural guidelines, and my advice had given him ideas for how to verify whether those guidelines were actually legally enforceable. A woman told me she'd almost paid a suspicious invoice before seeing a news article about my case. Instead of paying, she'd checked with the county and discovered the HOA claiming to represent her property had never been registered. She'd reported it to police, and they'd found it was the same person running multiple fake HOA scams across Southern California. These conversations reminded me that the impact of standing up to fraud goes beyond just your own situation. By fighting back against Brenda Caldwell's fake HOA, I'd inadvertently helped create awareness and protection for countless other homeowners. As time passed, and the memories of those stressful months faded, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I'd learned. The experience had taught me about the importance of documentation, the value of persistence, and the power of community action. It had also shown me that justice, while sometimes slow, could prevail when people stood up for what was right. I kept all the documents from the case in a file box in my home office. Every now and then, when I needed inspiration or a reminder of what I was capable of, I'd pull out that original invoice with its gold script letterhead and bold red threats. It seemed almost quaint now, this piece of paper that had caused so much trouble. But it represented something important, proof that I hadn't backed down when confronted with what appeared to be legitimate authority. The house on Magnolia Drive continued to be everything I'd hoped for when I bought it. The view of the San Bernardino Mountains was spectacular on clear days. The neighborhood was quiet and friendly. And best of all, there was no HOA telling me what color I could paint my front door or when I needed to mow my lawn. My neighbors and I occasionally joked about the great HOA scam of 2025, as we'd started calling it. Frank Morrison liked to threaten to start his own HOA whenever someone's yard got a little messy, which always got a laugh. Jessica Patel used her recovered $1,200 to take a vacation to Hawaii, which she said helped her finally get over the stress of the whole ordeal. For my part, I became more engaged in local community issues. I attended city council meetings, joined a neighborhood watch program, and even volunteered with a nonprofit that helped homeowners understand their rights. The experience with the fake HOA had awakened something in me, a desire to help protect others from the kind of scam I'd encountered. In the fall of that year, I was contacted by a journalist writing a book about consumer fraud in America. She wanted to include my story as a case study. I agreed, on the condition that she also highlight the work of Detective Santos and David Martinez, whose expertise had been crucial to resolving the case. The journalist, Melissa Torres, spent an afternoon at my house interviewing me. She was particularly interested in the moment when I decided to fight back rather than just pay the invoice. "What made you so sure it was worth pursuing?" she asked. "A lot of people would have just paid the $1,200 to avoid the hassle." I thought about it for a moment. I think it was the principle of it. Something about that invoice felt wrong from the start. The fact that it wasn't mentioned in any of my closing documents, the aggressive threats, the vague justifications. It all added up to something that didn't pass the smell test. And once I started investigating and realized it was definitely a scam, I couldn't let it go. If I'd paid, she would have just kept doing it to other people. Someone had to stop her. But it took months of your time and cost you money in legal fees. Was it worth it in the end? Absolutely. I got my $300 from the settlement, but that's not the point. The point is that we stopped a criminal, helped victims recover their money, and created awareness that might prevent future scams. You can't put a price on that. Melissa's book came out the following spring. My chapter was titled "The HOA That Wasn't There," and it detailed the entire saga from that first invoice to Brenda's sentencing. Melissa had done excellent research, interviewing not just me but also several of my neighbors, Detective Santos Martinez, and even Deputy District Attorney Chen. Reading the chapter was surreal. Seeing my experience laid out in print, with all the details and context that I'd lived through, gave me a new appreciation for how significant the case had been. It wasn't just about my $1,200, or even the $15,000 Brenda had collected. It was about the principle that people can't just invent authority and expect others to submit to it. The book got decent reviews and some regional attention. I did a couple of radio interviews and one TV appearance on a local news program. Each time, I emphasized the same message: verify, document, and don't be afraid to stand up to fraudulent authority. 2 years after that first invoice appeared on my door, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Brenda Caldwell. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten on plain notebook paper, and it was surprisingly brief. "Mr. Walsh, I wanted to write to you directly to apologize. I know you've heard this from me before, but I want you to know that I think about what I did every day. I thought I was improving the neighborhood, but I was really just lying to myself. I was desperate and depressed, and I convinced myself that the ends justified the means. They didn't. I hurt you and a lot of other people. I'm working now on rebuilding my life the right way with honesty and integrity. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm truly sorry. Brenda Caldwell." I read the letter twice, then put it in the file box with all the other documents from the case. I didn't respond to it, but I also didn't throw it away. It felt like an important part of the story, a coda that showed even the antagonist of this tale was a real person who'd made mistakes and was trying to do better. Life moved on. Seasons changed. Magnolia Drive remained quiet and HOA-free. I continued to live in my house, work my job, and enjoy the life I'd built in Riverside. The fake HOA saga became part of my personal history, a story I'd tell at dinner parties or when meeting new neighbors. But it was more than just a story. It was a reminder of the importance of standing up for yourself, doing your research, and not being intimidated by people who claim authority they don't actually have. It was proof that one person really can make a difference when they are willing to put in the effort to fight for what's right. And perhaps most importantly, it was a cautionary tale about the need for vigilance in a world where scammers are always looking for new ways to exploit people's fears and uncertainties. The fake HOA scam worked because it played on homeowners' legitimate concerns about protecting their property values and avoiding legal trouble. It took advantage of the fact that most people don't fully understand HOA law and are willing to pay to avoid conflict. The best defense against these kinds of scams is education and community. By sharing information, checking facts, and supporting each other, homeowners can protect themselves from fraudsters like Brenda Caldwell. And when scams do occur, reporting them promptly and pursuing justice ensures that the scammers face consequences and future victims are protected. As I write this, sitting in my home office with the afternoon sun streaming through the window and my view of the mountains clear and beautiful, I feel grateful for how everything turned out. The experience was stressful and time-consuming, but it taught me valuable lessons and helped protect my community. I never did receive another invoice from any HOA, real or fake. My property remains blissfully free of association oversight, which is exactly how I like it. And while I'm sure there are many legitimate HOAs that provide real value to their communities, I'm equally sure that I made the right choice in verifying the authority of anyone claiming to have power over my property. The whole experience reinforced a simple truth that everyone should remember. When someone demands money from you and threatens legal action if you don't pay, take a breath, do your research, and don't be bullied into compliance. The law is on your side if you take the time to understand it and stand up for your rights. That fake invoice taped to my door turned out to be the beginning of an unexpected journey, one that taught me about the legal system, property rights, and my own capacity for persistence in the face of intimidation. It's a journey I'm glad I took, even though I never would have chosen it. And it's a story I'll never forget, because it proved that ordinary people can challenge fraud and win when they're armed with facts, determination, and a refusal to back down from bullies pretending to have authority they never actually possessed.